There has been a revolutionary change in demographic research, partly because in the middle of the last century, around 1945, very few countries had good population data.
Something like 70 years ago, population was considered one of the biggest issues.
Demographers were well aware that following World War II, there would be a sort of explosion in the growth of the world's population, in part because of, really driven by the knowledge that had been developed about control of disease and keeping people alive and protecting them from premature death is, of course, one of the great accomplishments of the 20th century.
There have been huge changes, not only in population research, but in population dynamics. The world is so different from what it was just a few decades ago. It has been a demographic revolution.
When we sit down to look at the dynamics of population and demography in different parts of the world, the solutions are different depending on where you sit and what country we're talking about.
One of the major contributions from demographers and statisticians was to collect data.
The Population Commission was formed in 1946, in very early days of the United Nations, and the Population Division was created around the same time to support the work of the Commission.
If we recall that the very first session of the Commission on Population Development took place in 1947. Now it's a good 70 years has passed. We are marking the 70th year.
Dealing with these population issues was equal to dealing with development of the countries in the world. Dealing with population issues at the UN was extremely important in preparing our policies for the future. This is what UN does.
The peace and prosperity of mankind for generations to come depend to a great extent on the success of our effort to solve the population problem before the end of the century.
There was a big event in 1974. It was a World Population Conference in Bucharest, and there was discussion about population policy versus development policy, and the slogan it was development is the best contraceptive.
And after long debates, it was agreed that population affects development, but also development affects population.
Certainly the international conference, Bucharest, Mexico City, Cairo, these were landmarks.
The specific concerns of women.
By society and the rank that they hold today should be considered.
Globalization of ideas should not mean the imposition of one idea.
Cairo was a wonderful moment or a wonderful opportunity to have a gathering to discuss the new issues. And yes, it was quite successful. We had a series of important expert group meetings. We had a deep involvement of the regional commissions. It was a major activity involving the entire UN system.
It means human rights, women's status, urbanization, family, the situation of the family, access to contraception and reproductive health, a lot of dimensions.
Cairo, in many ways, shifted the focus even more toward individual concerns.
And they have brought perspectives that sometimes were not aired at the global level.
I believe that the issue of, for example, reproductive health was a matter that was not too openly, publicly discussed in the 40s. While these days we all understand the importance of a healthy population for a state, the state is ready to involve itself in the education process. This is a far more open process than it was before in the 40s.
That reality is so important in terms of not only understanding policy, but also programmatic action. So I would say we need to reduce maternal mortality by 50%, or we need to make sure that every woman, every girl, everywhere has access to information and services for family planning. We have to then ask ourselves, what does it mean in this particular context? Because every context is unique.
Over the past 70 years, Commission has been key platform for exchange views on population-related issues.
Its session, its interactive debates provides the platform for member states and for member states to share their experiences and their policies on the ground, success stories when it comes to national policies on topics relating to population and development.
The Commission plays a very important role because it has a solid technical background, but at the same time, it's the space for this political negotiations, and this political negotiation is very complex.
You know, one of the interesting but also very challenging aspects of the Commission on Population and Development is that we deal with topics that are so fundamental to life. We deal with what are often referred to as the vital events of life: birth, death, marriage, migration. These are the things that define the chapters in a person, in an individual's life, and naturally there's a lot of meaning associated with them.
We have to consider issues in a holistic way, with a holistic approach, and I think that has changed. We have more global view on these issues than before.
As I speak, I'm sure there are teleconferences going on between different parts of the world on specific issues. So that if, for example, and I will give you that, UNFPA is seized today by wanting to reduce the prevalence and the incidence of child marriage in the world. Now, of course, what we then do is to bring together our representatives in different parts of the world where this occurs. And we would then exchange ideas as to what's going on.
It's been important that countries and other participants, other stakeholders, acknowledge the differences of opinion that exist, the different cultural values, and have a respect for those differences, but at the same time to recognize that there are universal human rights, which are very important, which must be upheld in this setting, and the balance between those different perspectives and points of view is critical for the success of the Commission.
The UN still remains the key source of population data for the rest of the world, whether all the other agencies. This is one area where the UN leads. And I think we have a very, very big role in ensuring, in providing the evidence for policies to be made.
I think population research has, for the last few decades, been less than sheer numbers and more of analysis of the social and economic and cultural conditions around those numbers.
However, the challenge today is for them to align this work with the SDGs. As you know, SDGs are the defining framework that are going to really determine the course of development at the national as well as subnational levels, with increasing number of countries aligning their development policies with the SDGs.
The Commission in its 50th session will discuss an important topic relating to the changing population, age structures, and sustainable development, where we're going to look at different trends and different views, and it's an important opportunity for countries to come there and share their best practices and experiences.
When we talk about economic and sustainable development, we are talking about people. So the Commission will be at the forefront in the efforts to implement the Agenda 2030.
Population trends are some of the most powerful forces shaping development in the world. They really, in some ways, define the playing field on which this game is going to be played. It's really the starting point for any understanding of development processes, is to understand the number of people, the age distribution, the balance of men and women in different spheres.
Everybody needs to see population in a positive sense. And I believe that all of us have a responsibility to talk to policymakers, to see population as an asset.
Underneath it all, there's a strong case for optimism, and there's a strong argument about the benefits of development for individual human beings. And I think it's very important for governments to understand the inevitability of some of the demographic changes that are taking place. All of these things have enormous implications for policy and for well-being. But if governments understand these trends and anticipate them, they can manage them well.